What is up, my beautiful people? Hope you're having a great day right now. Exile451 here again with you to see if we might be able to make it a little better. Going to r/self today for a longer story that's all about overcoming what life throws at you. Now sit back, relax, and let's get inspired. Brief history of my life and overcoming adversity. He's got a little bit of a disclaimer here, so I'm just going to jump past that and get right to the story. I would like to go and talk about some of the things that led me to where I am. Firstly, I am now in my early 20s. I had grown up with chronic pain my entire life, and for over a decade, it was attributed to growing pains or something that I will just grow out of due to the fact that my doctors could never determine a true cause. By the time I was around 13 or 14, I finally had a breakthrough with one of the many doctors that I'd seen. They diagnosed me with rheumatoid arthritis, something I had a very tough time coming to terms with at the time. Being that young and feeling both mentally and physically famished took a toll on me. As time would pass, so would the types of medications I would try, but to no avail. I was still chronically fatigued and in pain. This is when my depression began to gain traction. Within a year of being diagnosed with arthritis, X-rays revealed that my lower spine was in the early stages of fusion, which led to the second diagnosis of ankylosing spondylitis. Being a relatively uncommon condition, especially for my age, I got the sense that treatment would be complicated. For those who don't know, ankylosing spondylitis is an autoimmune disorder and essentially means my immune system was attacking the tops of my vertebrae. My body would compensate by building up the bone on the areas that were being targeted, thus eventually leaving a portion of my spine a solid piece of bone. This is of course the worst case and won't necessarily happen to me, yet the future risk existed and was unnerving. Time would pass and eventually lead to another diagnosis of narcolepsy secondary to autoimmune disorders. This brings me to when I was around 15, with multiple relatively debilitating diagnoses under my belt. I felt completely lost, almost as if the world was just begging me to fail. I told my parents that I wanted to discontinue any medical treatment. In my head at the time, suffering and being at the mercy of my pain was the life I was doomed to live, and I needed to accept that. My depression ran with fury through my mind as I constantly tried to rationalize why my body, out of all, would create its own hell. In a weird way, I felt like my body had failed me, and in turn, I would fail in the life I wanted to live. My entire memorable life had been a soup of constant pain, never feeling the energy to do anything, the deepest fatigue imaginable, and this constant anger coursing through my mind. I became angry at the world. Nobody could possibly begin to imagine the daily torment I felt, is what I thought. As high school progressed, I associated myself with the crowd that aligned with how I felt. It was those who weren't happy in their lives either. I was introduced to alcohol and drugs in my sophomore year and quickly found them to be my quick ticket to relief. Hindsight is 2020, and this was obviously an awful remedy, but it worked. I started experimenting with more chemicals that would take me to a place free of pain and worry. Long story short, a fair amount of time of somewhat heavy psychedelic drug abuse during important stages in brain development took its toll. I started feeling paranoid and anxious even when I wasn't on the drugs. The friends I had started dropping like flies, whether that meant being arrested, expelled, or dead from overdoses. I finally gained the mental strength to recognize the disgusting path I was going down. As the anxiety and paranoia became worse, I had convinced myself that I was schizophrenic. Even though my symptoms didn't align with a true schizophrenic diagnosis, it became a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, and it wasn't hard to convince a psychiatrist to make an official diagnosis. I only took the antipsychotics for maybe a month or two before I had the "what the F are you doing realization. Deep down, I knew that I'd screwed the truth. But it felt so good, feeling like it wasn't my fault, that I was the way I was. Lost. It took about 2 years from discontinuing the use of psychedelics and the antipsychotic medication, but I finally gained a new level of mental clarity that I had never experienced before. It was as if I finally accepted responsibility for the person I am and understood that it would take conscious and deliberate action on my end to become the person I wanted to be. A scientist, an engineer, an active member of society, a person that my parents were proud of, a person who actually does what they say. A bit of time passed and I was sort of stagnant. Even though I wasn't actively living such a toxic lifestyle that I had been before, I never really acted on the motivation I had felt in the past. I just existed through the days. Still with the pain and tiredness I had felt before, but with a slightly better perspective and the tiniest bit of hope. I got accepted into a local university and declared my engineering major. I was overflowing with happiness. For the absolute first time in my life on this planet, I felt like I had a future, a tangible future. The semesters passed seemingly just as fast as my optimism eroded. I started drinking nightly, with the logic of 6 beers a night is nothing. Real alcoholics drink far more. I used this logic as a crutch for a long time, refusing to see the harm. My grades were deteriorating and I knew I needed a change. I decided to apply for another university out of the city I had been living in. The program I applied for was a difficult one to get into, and I knew my odds of being accepted were slim to none. Miraculously, I got an acceptance letter in the mail. In the next few months, I would move in with a friend in the new town, just a few hours away, and start my new life. I felt fresh. Those old problems can't follow me here, I thought to myself. Boy, was I wrong. I continued drinking every night, and the next 2 semesters proved far more difficult than I had anticipated. My poor study habits, awful sleep schedule, and lack of effort all contributed to my failure. The semesters that I had wished to be my best turned out to be my worst. I wanted to be in that program so bad. So why did I shrug off all those assignments? Why did I act as if this meant nothing to me, when deep down it meant everything? What the heck was wrong with me? I was notified I was being removed from the program. I broke down, desperate for some explanation as to why I allowed myself to fail. In an act of pure desperation, I somehow convinced the university to give me one more chance. This will be different, I repeatedly told myself, all the while without making any changes to the system that had failed me so deeply in the past. About a month before this redemption semester, as I call it, began, I met a girl. While her and I began to become fond of each other, I held on to the idea that she could be the one that saves me. I thought that everything I do from this point on is for her, and that would be the motivation I would need to succeed. Fast forward a smudge, and everything was going swimmingly. I was passing my courses, my relationship with this girl was blossoming, and I thought this was it. This was the time in my life where I would look back on it in 30 years and say, wow, you really did it. Against all odds, you did it. I had truly thought I was going to marry her. There wasn't a hint of doubt for me. I should mention, for obvious reasons, I didn't express this overwhelming collage of emotions with her in fear that she would be scared away. I focused on allowing our relationship to grow organically, and it did, without creeping her out. My life was feeling better than ever. I felt studious. I felt like a developing adult. I felt like a person that aligned their actions with their goals and was pursuing a life worth living. I know it might sound crazy, but I felt like my pain had been more tolerable when I was with her. I felt like I could fall asleep easier. I even stopped eating junk food and looked forward to eating salads with her. I was completely and utterly in love with this girl. This was until about 3/4 of the way into the semester. For some unknown reason that I still to this day don't know, she texted me and said that she didn't feel the same sentiment towards me anymore and that she no longer wanted to see me. I was devastated. My highest of highs collapsed into my lowest of lows, I thought. I would go on to let myself slide back into academic failure. I passed a single course out of the semester with a mere C and received an F in the remaining courses. And the school notified me I was no longer a part of the program. I finally reached this critical moment in my life. I was either going to make some big changes or I was going to be miserable for the rest of my existence. I reached out to my dad, who I never really had much of an emotional relationship with, and told him that I was depressed. I told him about how I felt lost in life and that I was in desperate need of guidance. To my surprise, he reacted with compassion and understanding. We sat and talked about the times in his life where he felt trapped and ways that he has learned throughout his life to move forward. I remember he said something along the lines of, "Listen, you got 3 knocks in the face in a short amount of time. You failed in school, you got your heart broken, and you got told you can't continue the program you wanted. For most people, just one of those knocks is enough to be too much. But you're asking for help because you haven't given up." Admitting to my dad the way I felt was the best thing I could have done, and my only regret is that I waited so long to do it. All of these years, I felt so powerless, allowing the river of life to carry me in any way it wanted, destined to be a victim to my hardships. But talking to him, I don't know how to explain it really, brought this sense of control. He told me about the mistakes he's made. He said that at times he felt he wouldn't ever be able to recover from these mistakes, but managed to take a tiny step forward whenever he could. That these tiny steps, unimaginably tiny steps, they add up. They gradually grow and with time become an unstoppable force of motivation. I realized that I wasn't getting better or seeing improvements in my life because I wasn't trying to be. I had dug such a deep hole for myself that it blocked out the light, that I just needed to look up for once. I guess the purpose of this lengthy post was not only to help myself, since I remember the struggles I've overcome, but also to remind the people reading it that you have the power. We do not have to let life pass by while we wait in silence for a miracle to make it better. For most of my life, I was depending on the world to bring me peace. But I have learned that it has to come from within. We have to work towards being the person that we know we can be. Nothing limits our lives except for ourselves. Since failing that last semester and opening up with my father, I took the next semester off to work on myself. My relationship with my family has never been better. I used to feel weird, sort of like a burden, when I wanted to tell others about my feelings. But now, I have gotten to the point where my dad and I can have open and honest discussions. Him and I have spent a great deal of time discussing tools and methods that I can implement into my everyday life to better myself. Throughout all of this, the years of pain and confusion, I finally understand that in order to be your best self, you need to take a step forward every day. Not when it is convenient, not when it is easy. You have to work towards it every day, no matter what. I learned that every moment is a choice. I get to decide if I want to do something that benefits me, harms me, or makes me stay the same. Fast forward to today, and I am enrolled back at the university with an astrophysics major. Although not the major I had set out to accomplish, I found it to be closely related with my initial aspirations and fully plan on coming back to finish my engineering degree once I graduate and get some work experience. The semester starts next month, and I am ready, more so than I have ever been. I started gardening and I have a lot of plants that I get to enjoy every day. I have always had a love for fish and set up some gorgeous tanks for a couple rescued betta fish and an awesome African Kychillid tank that I am incredibly proud of. I know I probably got that wrong, butcher me in the comments. I am obviously still learning and continuing to grow as a person, but the small step of opening up to my dad turned out to be the greatest and most eye-opening thing I could have done. My life is finally on a path that I like and look forward to walking down. Realizing that I was the one in control of my life and that I couldn't let the world decide how I felt gave me the power in life that I always felt like I was lacking. In short, no matter how deep a hole you feel like you are in, there is a way out. The only thing between you and becoming your true self is doubt. I promise that if I can turn myself around the way I did, you can too. Best wishes. Okay, this video has gone on way longer than any other one I've done, so I'll keep my comments short. But holy crap, what a story. What a transformation that was. He didn't give up on himself, and while life isn't rolling along on easy street, he has a purpose now. Like he said, anyone can do it. Your mistakes don't matter, only your future. If he can turn things around, so can you. Life can and will get better if you take the steps to make it happen. You just have to take one of those steps every day. Thank you all so much for watching today. I know that was a long video, so I'm super appreciative you stuck with me, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Now go have an awesome rest of the day, everyone. I'll see you all tomorrow. Until then, I'm Exile451. Stay beautiful, people.